But I think most Americans recognize that there is a very serious connection between the conflict in Iran and all of those pocketbook issues that you were referring to earlier. And I think that even among the president's base, a lot of the reason why he won is because he ran with a very particular kind of foreign policy, non-interventionist. We're not going to start stupid wars abroad. And I think it's possible for two things to be true at once, that the president was being bold, is willing to confront very bad, malevolent actors in the world, but he also went about it in a foolish and foolhardy way that seems to be pretty poorly calculated. It isn't clear that there is an obvious good path forward here. If the president imagines that he can just carry out this conflict by dropping bombs from above without ever getting any boots on the ground and make any meaningful progress, I think that seems to be a policy that's probably not going to yield results.
I think voters right now, their sentiment about the economy is similar, or if not the same or worse than it was under Biden. And I think some of it has to do with the fact that they felt like they got out of the woods and now they're going in the wrong direction because of some of the decisions Trump has made.
Absolutely. And I think it's, adjudicating whether Obama or Trump has a better record of Iran at this point is a bit of a moot point. We are where we are in this very difficult, intractable situation. And I think that the president, the administration needs to take a very hard look in the mirror. They need to find allies on both sides of the aisle. It is very difficult, and I suspect it was a difficult vote to cast when American service persons are being killed abroad by an adversarial regime, and one is voting against actual engagement with them. I understand why someone might want to cast that vote. If the administration doesn't seem to have a coherent strategy for dealing with this, I think it can be very difficult to actually rally support for some sort of military engagement. But this is where we are right now, and figuring out how to get out of that entanglement. Yeah, I think the thing that I would take into consideration here is that if the president of the United States is pursuing a deal like this, the hope is that you can make the Middle East a more stable place, and if you can strengthen relations between the Israelis and the Saudis, that will hopefully help towards that end. And I would say this: I would go further. To the extent there's any hope for a resolution to the situation in Palestine, the Saudis and the Israelis being on better terms and working together collaboratively is something that might actually help to solidify an agreement that is better for the Palestinian people. I think some of the characterization of various policy pursuits as putting Israel first, when in fact it would simply be better for the Middle East broadly if the Israelis and the Saudis had a stronger relationship and were working together in a meaningful sense. It seems obvious to me that that would be better for the Palestinian people because it would be worse for, say, Hamas, for example.
Hamas is a terrorist group, but the Saudis don't view it that way. Obviously, they don't want the deal.
It's one way that it's
You have an American president who is signing off in the Congress on the integration of our military with the Israeli military.
I think that's a bit of
Section 219 and Section 214.
There's already military collaboration.
No, we don't have that with any ally. You have the American people who have been upset at our unconditional aid to Israel, who are upset that we supported Israel and what they did in Gaza.
There's been a lot of conditions, and the President of the United States has applied a great deal of pressure.
By the way, this is Republicans and Democrats.
They could have pursued a more pragmatic goal, like trying to get them to be a bigger part of the board of peace or take some other action, affirmative step in the direction of normalization of relations with Israel. They didn't do those things, and that's what
they didn't even talk. Apparently, inflation has eclipsed wage growth for the last 2 months.
I think it's impossible to ignore the stench of corruption, the fact that the president has made a tremendous amount of money, that his family are enriching themselves. All of that is very bad. I also think it's important for there to be some nuance and thoughtfulness when we're approaching these stories. This enterprise API access for social media companies, that is often accompanied by some high-speed access to data. Usually this is to benefit like high-frequency traders. Most of the president's Truth Social posts, if he's tweeting something consequential, we know about it almost right away. Having a fraction of a second worth of information faster, I don't actually think that makes a huge difference here. That's not.
So then why would anybody pay $100,000?
You're paying $100,000 for a number of things. I don't know that anyone really cares that much about Truth Social.
Why would anyone pay $100,000 if they didn't think there was clear market benefit to knowing the information beforehand? Because
I'm not sure how many people have signed up for this service.
But hold on, Kmele, because it doesn't exist yet. Yeah. They're August 1st,
or
right?
Even would be willing
but we know that the president's tweets move markets. We know that there have been massive trades off of Trump's tweets announcing a ceasefire deal with Iran, announcing a blockade with that has already happened.
Yes. And the poly market manipulation.
Based on the public tweets and who knows what information privately people knew. The guy who's running the teleprompter is being investigated for potentially insider trading off of information on Trump's speeches.
It's
a real thing.
All of that is exceedingly bad.
That's a real thing. People do care about corruption.
But the API access in particular, that specific dimension of the story actually doesn't seem nearly as interesting to me as the actual fact, again, demonstrative fact that they are enriching themselves in an unprecedented way.
Even putting aside the market manipulation, don't you think every American citizen should just get information from our president at the same time?
I concur.
People shouldn't pay to get advance notice from the president of the United States?
Get rid of your political pro subscription.
Trump has approved 80% of the disaster requests from Republican governors, but only 60% from Democratic governors, according to an AP analysis. Is this the new normal?
It may be the new normal for this administration, but it is an exceedingly bad look for the president. I think this is just really bad politics. If there is some sort of national disaster or tragedy, and one can even make a slightly reasonable argument that, hey, look at this, he denied us our money because we wouldn't play this game with him, that is going to look so bad for them in the very near future. If you want to make election denial the raison d'etre of your administration, I suppose you can go ahead and do that. You're going to lose elections. People are going to dislike you. But if you want to bind that to whether or not you're going to be giving out aid funds that are going to be used by the state in order to protect their citizens against natural disasters and other sorts of things, that just seems like the worst possible idea imaginable.
Seems risky.
I can't imagine defending it.
Truth Social sell-off. One more way Donald Trump is profiting from the presidency. We talked a little bit about this. I mean, there is money involved here. It'd be one thing if it was just Truth Social profiting, which would be bad enough. But Trump actually, he's directly financially being impacted by this.
I mean, yeah, look, I would say this. I am more concerned when I see the President of the United States selling his token and giving people access to him directly. I will meet with you in Mar-a-Lago if you buy my token. That is open corruption in my estimation. I think there's at least a little bit of nuance that has to be acknowledged with the API access. That's all I'm saying.
All right.